there's a path being paved on a grassroots level that's also supported through larger scale infrastructure. So going to start by introducing our speakers today. I'm going to start with Catherine Fasega. She's an award-winning filmmaker and released her full-length feature film in 2012. The film was Treacherous Heart. Her latest film, 2 Weeks in Lagos, premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in May 2019 and opened in cinemas across West Africa in February 2021. And as of July 2021, it's also available on Netflix. 2 Weeks in Lagos was nominated for an Africa Movie Academy Awards in 2020 for the category of Best Film by an African Living Abroad. Catherine currently has 3 feature films and 2 series in development. She's a member of Film Fatale LA, African Women Acting Canada, AWA. She's also part of the Calgary Society of Independent Filmmakers, Women in Film and Television Alberta, and she's the current president of Black Actors and Film Guild Canada for the Alberta chapter. So thank you, Catherine, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
And our second speaker today is Maya Anton. She's a creative design strategist with over 10 years of experience in the areas of fashion, craft, and capacity building. She has a postgrad degree in creative design education, and she's been a mentor within creative education since 2012. She has a background in jewelry design with a master's from Central St. Martin's. She's worked as the lead creative for Omer Asim, which is a London-based women wear brand, and she's been working there since 2010. She has a lot of experience in capacity building with creative craft brands. She has worked on a number of craft development projects, and she's also one of the founding members of Sobajo Khartoum, a creative social enterprise whose work focuses on the research and preservation of Sudanese crafts and culture, with special focus on teaching and empowering women from underprivileged backgrounds. So thank you, Maya, for joining us also today. And
thank you.
And our last speaker today is Benga Foloruncho. He's a gaming rep for Kucheza Gaming, a company that focuses on providing esport experiences to 6 to 18 years old children, and through a network of leagues, school collegiate system, industry involvement, and computing curriculum. Is also personal development enthusiast with a deep-rooted passion for social change, harnessed through a decade of multi-sectoral experience. And thank you, Benga, for joining us today.
Thank you, Sheikh.
Thank you. So I'm going to start really with a kind of an open-ended question for all of you. Just what drew you to your current line of work, and how would you describe its significance within your community? I think whoever wants to start, it's a kind of a general question, just to get to know a bit more about your work and how you got started.
Okay, I think I'll start there. Yeah. And like you said, I'm a filmmaker, and what drew me to making films is just the love of storytelling. So, and I think for as Africans, like we all grow up with that love for storytelling. So I discovered early on that, I had a gift for storytelling. And so I studied theater arts to be able to learn how to put this gift into action, So, and this is really what drew me to film. I do films because there are stories that we must tell. And I want to tell the stories that matter most to us, the stories that impact our lives, because I think film is a really powerful medium, to use to put messages across. And that is what drew me to the medium of film and why I continue to do what I do.
Great answer. Thank you.
All right. Go ahead, Maya. Go ahead.
Thank you. Basically, I've always kind of been drawn to fashion, to jewelry design, to these kind of well, growing up in Africa, you kind of there's always this style that you're drawn to creativity. However, when I was doing my master's, I spent a lot of time in Sudan and a lot of time in DRC Congo, trying to specifically research jewelry from that region. And I found that it was very difficult to do that because there wasn't a lot of information out there, especially in northern Sudan. There's not a lot of information, and I really struggled to do the research. So I kind of did a backtrack and I started looking into what was available there in terms of jewelry making and crafts, and that research led me to realize that there was a huge decline in traditional crafts in the region. There was no government support for the crafts. There was no training. There was basically it was disappearing. Craft heritage was disappearing. And so that became an area of interest through me trying to basically do my research. So I then started to work with craftspeople in Sudan to try and build up or try and help them develop a marketplace. So that's kind of where this whole journey with working with craft within Sudan started for me.
Thank you. You mentioned just about your answer. You mentioned hurdles that you encountered, structural hurdles, excuse me, with the government. Was it a lack of access to information?
Basically, there's not a lot of kind of documented research in terms of specifically jewelry in that region. So when I was doing my research, I didn't really find anything written about the craft in that region. And so, doing an academic research was a bit difficult. So I then went to Sudan to try and do it on the ground, and then became aware of these gaps also because this area of craft was disappearing. So it wasn't only that there wasn't anything documented, but there was also a decline in the craft in Sudan. People were not being trained in specific crafts anymore. There wasn't a market for it. There wasn't a need for it. So specifically with jewelry, now there's a huge kind of there's a historical connection with jewelry in Sudan culturally. Women, invest in jewelry. There's marriage ceremonies that are related to jewelry. There's a lot of kind of historical jewelry. Jewelry has a big part in the social culture. However, with the social economic situation in Sudan, there's been a decline. Okay. And so nowadays, when people have the money to buy jewelry, they go to the Gulf. So then there's this gap within Sudan in terms of the local craftsmen are not able to sustain their businesses.
Okay.
Hope that answers your question.
No, it does. Thank you.
All right. So what drew me to video games? I basically was just looking for a job. I needed a job and I got a job, but that's not true. So in 2019, I remember I did some training with Google, where we trained over 2,000 kids on online safety. While going from school to do this, I realized that there was a gap in our education, and the way students or kids were being taught was not as effective as it should be. So when my boss started the idea of starting a video games company that is focused on kids, the idea was not just for children to just come play games, but more, how do we use video games to teach? How do we impact them with what we have? This is a space that is already engaging for them. And based on my interest in teaching or in impacting knowledge, especially for kids, it was like a no-brainer for me to just, join the train and carry on. And it's been a very rewarding one, even though there are a lot of challenges here and there with the gatekeepers of these kids. But yeah, that's how I got into the video games industry. Yeah.
Thanks for your answer. And going back to what Maya said earlier about the hurdles she encountered, structural hurdles, did you also encounter the same? You said there was an issue of gatekeepers. Was it also restricting access to the market?
Well, it's the gatekeepers I'm speaking of right now, because for every child, there are two primary gatekeepers for them. It's either the parents or their guardians or the schools. So those are the two key places where you can really get access to these children. And when we speak of video games, the notion of video games in Nigeria, I can only speak for Nigeria at this time, is the fact that there is no life or there is no future in gaming. So nobody really knows or understands the extent to what the games or the video games industry can give. So they only think of or remember the fact that if me as a parent or me as an educator, I want a child to give me time to do other things, I just get them busy, go play game. So nobody sees it as something serious. Nobody sees it as the fact that it's a $160 billion industry, which is bigger than the music and the movie industry put together. Nobody sees it as that. So nobody wants to pay attention to it. And it's a major challenge. But right now, with the little work we've done so far, things are beginning to change gradually. And we are hopeful, and we are still hoping that as we keep pushing the envelope, the needle keeps moving. And at some point in time, there will be a total embrace of the video games industry in education.
Yeah. Thank you. You've already touched a bit upon the significance of the work you do for your respective communities, but I was wondering, who are the target audiences or consumers for the work that you do? Benga, you already...
Okay, so like you said, I've touched on it. Our focus audience is 6 to 18-year-olds. However, there are some projects we run that is for the higher, when I say higher, like 8 to 18. For example, when we run competitions around game design and development, we focus on the 8 to 18-year-olds. For the from 6-year-old and upward, we have a project which we run called Play-Based Learning. We partnered with a company based in the UK called Digital Schoolhouse. They have over 50 workshops where we take computing concepts and teach them in a playful way. So the idea is more, how do I teach you algorithms through dance? So there is a game called Dance, Just Dance. So we took that game and took algorithm, so I can teach you algorithm through dance, or I can teach you mathematics through dance. I can teach you English through dance. So it's just taking that same concept of teaching computing in the classroom, but teaching it in a playful way. So our audience presently, 6 to 18-year-olds, because we believe that is the bedrock of the society, or where the society really starts from. I remember some time ago, we were having a conversation with was it Mastercard Foundation, where they were saying, oh, we want girls in STEM and the likes. And one thing we realized is the fact that when these girls get into year 10, they are already thinking of what they want to do. So if you don't get them while they are in year 7 to help them understand the different aspects of STEM or STEAM education, by the time you go meeting them in year 10, they've already made up their mind. I am going with my friend to study one thing or the other. So the idea for us is, while they are still young, while we can still impact them with good education and a broader view of the different career pathways which are open to them, it's better we reach out to them early and give them that information. So 6 to 18-year-olds are our target audiences. Okay,
so just influence their choices in early. You start early just to influence their choices in their life. Okay, that's great. And Catherine, I know the question is a bit not unfair, but a bit harder for you since you're a filmmaker.
Yeah.
Your target audience in mind, but you said earlier that there are important stories to tell.
Yeah.
What do they mean to you?
Yeah. Okay. Now, let me talk about the target audience first, because, you know, most of the time we go into film and we want to target everybody. We want everybody to come, you know, but it's really hard to target everybody, you know. So while you might want everybody to see your film, like the message of your film is directed to specific people. And we personally, for me, in my own company, we try to target a global audience, because what we're trying to do is to change the narratives around Africa and Africans, you know, the way we are perceived. Because in film, for so many years, the most important films out of Africa that made their way to Hollywood and to the Western world were made by white people who didn't even know Africa. So they portrayed us the way they think we are, but at the end of the day, we have to tell our own stories. We know who we are, and we have to tell our own stories, and we have to tell it in our own voices. And so that is why I target a global audience. I write for a global audience who see a different kind of Africa. So many of them have never been to Africa, have never left their countries. So whatever they know about us is what they see in news and others. So now they see the films, and I remember 2 weeks in Lagos being screened in New York. And a lot of the people who came, most of them African Americans, were surprised to see light-skinned Africans. And they were saying, how come these people are so light-skinned? Are they bleaching? And I'm like, no, actually, when you come to our communities, we have different complexions. It's really natural to see very light-skinned Africans. So that was really, very intriguing for them. And a lot of them were asking, oh, is this real? Is this really Africa? Is this Lagos? Or did you take it from a more cosmopolitan city? So these are they are beginning to understand that the Africa they have been shown, is different from the Africa, the real Africa. So, and this is what we intend to continue doing. And we continue to tell, these stories in a voice that, they can understand.
Yeah, it's really a great way of changing perceptions, or at least beginning to change the perceptions, for sure. Movies. Yeah. And Maya, in your case, it's a bit more niche since you're in Sudan, and you focus on a very specific demographic of women.
Yeah, we actually, the work that Sowajo does has kind of a multifaceted approach. Obviously, we do create, one of our target audiences is women from underprivileged backgrounds. We work a lot with IDP women, but that's kind of what our training goes into. So we train women to make different artifacts. However, as an art center, we also do a lot of other events. So the idea is to kind of outreach to the local community to teach them about their own culture and teach them culture appreciation, because I think, as Catherine was saying, there's this issue of like taking hold of the narrative and being in charge of the narrative. What happens a lot in Khartoum specifically is a lot of the art is kind of the gatekeepers of the art world tend to be either foreign expats or institutions like the British Council or the French Cultural Center or the German Cultural Center, which, for many years they've done a great job. However, they have a narrative that they are feeding back to us as opposed to us feeding our narrative to them or through them. So there is that problem that basically one of the things that Sowajo wants to do is take hold of that narrative and be the ones to decide what we want to do with our crafts, how we want to present them, and also how we want to develop them. Because one of the things that we really need to do is develop our creative industries. And that doesn't just mean developing the marketing strategies or developing our communication with outside world. It also means developing what we make in terms of craft, and developing that we're not just making tourist artifacts for expats to buy and put in their homes when they leave Sudan. We need to develop craft artifacts that are interesting to Sudanese people or to other Africans, and to get them to invest in their culture. So that is one of the things that we work with, and that's one of my specialties, is basically working with this idea of developing and making artifacts and making, cultural objects that are interesting to the next generation.
Yeah, you and Catherine's answer really, they intersect a lot. I think just the aspect of reclaiming our narrative and telling it the way we want through art, it's really underrated, and I don't think people realize the power that there is in that, be it through movies or jewelry in your case. But
yeah, there is a storytelling, there is a storytelling aspect as well to art, and to, to painting, artifact making, there is a storytelling aspect to it. So I guess, you know, that's where we intersect with our ideas, Catherine.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. So I also wanted to ask each of you, in your respective communities, the population that surrounds you, what kinds of media and art are most accessible to them? And is it a hurdle for you to get your art to the biggest percentage of the population possible, to as many people as possible? Have you encountered any issues with that? Maybe.
Yeah, I think issues. I think the main kind of thing that I see now, maybe because of the areas that I work in, but there's a sudden interest in painting from that part of the world, and I think everyone, when they think of African art, they think of specific types of paintings or a specific type of sculpture, and that's where you know, everyone's mind goes to, and that, I think, is an issue. It's a hurdle. It's a fad. It's a fetishism of, you know, African art and African culture again. So, you know, there is that hurdle of trying to get people to understand that, yeah, one Africa is a continent, not a country. It's not one culture, it's not one language, it's not one religion, and it's so multifaceted. You know, a lot of forums that I engage with, when they think of Africa, they think specifically of Nigeria, maybe Kenya, if you're lucky, South Africa, and then there's, you know, all of these other countries that get lost. You know, we are within Africa itself are a little bit possibly ignorant of what our neighbors are doing, and we're not interacting. And I think, you know, that's also an important thing that we need to maybe think about, how we interact as a continent before we start seeking how we interact externally. Maybe I've gone a bit off track with the question, so yeah. I'll let someone else jump in.
No, I think you make a really, really good point, Maya. Is the fact that, you know, it's always hard to help people to understand that, you know, Africa is not one country. You know, Africa, like, you know, we are a whole different nations of people, you know, and it's really complex and it's hard for people to understand that. So, and it's hard, you know, it makes it harder even to put one message across, because to put across a message that is truly African, you've got to learn, you know, to speak in the voices of all of Africa, which maybe one person can't do. So, and I think one of the ways to do that is really, like, we have to have more collaborations within Africa. Maya mentioned something that many of the Africans don't even know what is going on with their neighbors, you know, and that is true. Like, you know, I hear her talking about the IDP camps in Sudan, you know, and there are IDP camps in Nigeria, you know, and many people don't even know that these two countries are going through similar things, right? And so, you know, the African voice has to be a coalition of voices. Like, we have to come together, even if it's in films, right? So yes, the Western world knows a lot about Nigeria because Nollywood has in recent times been very popular. Nigerian music has made its way to the international scene, but there's still a whole lot more that needs to come out there. And collaborations are going to be the big way. Otherwise, we won't be able to get the message, you know, that we need to get across to the right people. We'll just keep giving snippets.
That's very true. And what about you, Benga?
Well, so in terms of our content in the video games industry, so at the moment, I know we have a publishing house, a publishing company in South Africa, but when we look at the video games industry, Africa itself does not have a server. So, for example, if an African wants to compete in terms of in an esports tournament with someone in Canada or in America or in the UK, they would most likely have to use the UK server, or the best which we do these days is to use the South African server, and that's a problem for Africans. And I remember myself and my boss, we were on a call with a guy named Desiree. Desiree is based in France, and they are fighting towards just, so there is this tournament that goes on in Europe where the very best of gamers come to compete, but not one seat is available for Africans. And they are beginning to fight to say, just give us at least even one slot out of the, no matter the amount we have, just give us one slot. And up to date, that's the conversation that is still ongoing, because the African market in terms of esports, or in terms of gaming, it's not there yet. And with the rate at which esports is being embraced in the African community, gradually the voices are beginning to come out, and people are beginning to see that there is a force going on here, and it's over time, it will be one thing that we will start seeing the changes happen in a very short period of time.
Thank you for your answer. You all touched really upon something I noticed all of you spoke about, the fact that, there's access to information, but foreigners, they don't necessarily take the initiative to really delve into, our different aspects of our culture and our countries. And I think one of the best ways to change that is through art as a vehicle. So how can we get foreign audiences to be drawn to and consume African art, but in a way that's going to fuel our economies, our respective economies?
Yeah, okay. I would like, because that one is something which is really
it's
very personal to me, So, and I think, first of all, I say this to a lot of filmmakers. I'm like, when you're telling your story, it doesn't matter what you're telling, you need to tell it in a global voice. You need to tell it in a way that, somebody who is not a Nigerian or is not a Sudanese, is not a Kenyan, can understand what you're saying. So it's not a question of diluting our culture. We can tell the same story, tell it even in our languages, but tell it in a way that you understand. We all consume stories coming out of South Korea right now. Everybody, like all Africans, are there watching South Korean movies. We're watching Indian movies. Why can we not make our own stories that attractive to others? It starts with the stories we choose to tell. We have to be authentic. We can only be authentic in our own voice. You can only tell what you know. When we begin to try to imitate, other cultures, say, oh yeah, maybe to be appealing to Western audiences, you have to be like that. You can never be, the original. You can't copy the original and be like it or be better than it. You can only be yourself. You are an original in your own, and you can only promote your own self, So, and I think the thing is, we need to make our stories more global. We need to tell it in a global voice. We need to begin to learn how to market our stories. How do we put this out? We have to start pushing out, those stories that we tell, whether it is through art or it is film or music or even gaming. We need to begin to be conscious about how we market this, how we put it out. Even before we make it, we say, who are we making this for? Where is it going to? We need to begin to train our people. So we have to start early to begin to train them, to teach them how to tell these stories, how to put it out. We have to catch them young, because I heard Benga talking before about, we are targeting this group and this group, and the problems they face with the gatekeepers, and this is where gaming and film have to work hand in hand. You can't succeed without the other, because these young people, they are attracted to their favorite characters, the favorite film stars. and they want to be like them. If your favorite film star is playing the role of a gamer who is doing really well, they want to be that person. So you find that even these gatekeepers are no longer problems, because these young people themselves are saying, this is what I want to do. This is where we want to be, We have to be conscious of those things. We need to be conscious about the kind of collaborations that we're seeking from the West, and we have to be really honest with ourselves that a lot of infrastructure we need, a lot of what we need to be successful, we don't have in Africa, so we have to be deliberate about what we seek from the West. It is not just about, like, me as a filmmaker going to do a film that makes a lot of money for me because it went to Hollywood or something. It's about, if my film gets to Hollywood, how does it affect the millions of other African filmmakers that are already there or coming up? How does it open up a door for them? How does it improve the continent? So these are the things we need to begin to talk about, the things we need to be deliberate about. And that is the way we're going to get, the foreign audiences being interested in our content and consuming it, really.
Oh, thank you so much for your answer.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Just to chime in a little bit to what you have said, there is need for us to take responsibility for our own narrative, in the sense that people, or I will still speak to the community where I belong, the gaming community. Africa is mobile first, and we don't realize the power of mobile when we even do our own planning. A research I read said Nigeria has more mobile phones than human beings in the country. We have more mobile phones than human beings. So the question really is, how are we tapping into the narrative of having mobile, or everybody having access to a mobile phone? We are still stuck with what is brought into us to say, this is what is available now, this is what is trending, this is what is going. No one is looking deep within to say, these are the things that we have access to. In terms of infrastructure, nobody is really looking to understand what is the easiest way for me to connect with the child, or to connect with the parent and the likes. And when it comes to video games, for example, getting a gadget for a child to play the game he or she loves. So, for example, Sheikh, you have a PS5 or not? And you know how much you bought your PS5. That's a lot of money, but I can still get a mobile phone to play some of the games which you play on your PS5. So these are some of the narratives we are not taking into account to understand how else can we drive our economy, how else can we get things to work easily and in a more faster way. We are still stuck with going with the narrative of what has been sold to us by the Western world, though not all are bad, but we need to start looking deep within, taking responsibility for our own narrative and telling our own story the way it should be told.
Yeah, honestly, a great answer. And just to touch upon what you both just said, I think they respect authenticity in our stories and the way we tell them, because I'm not sure, Catherine, you probably heard of Wakaliwood, the Ugandan film company. They went viral and they became very, very popular in the US for a movie called Who Killed Captain Alex. Very low budget movie with a lot of CGI special effects, but it just resonated so much with the American market because it's a very, very authentic Ugandan movie that displays our life. And I think they respected the fact that they went really all out with the little means that they had to make an entertaining movie. And yeah, so Maya, also in your case with the jewelry, how would you say that we can get foreigners attracted to Sudanese art?
I think you know, and there's a lot I agree with what you've already said. I think authenticity is like the word that I've actually written down here, because I think it's a very important driving factor in terms of also when you're making whatever products you're making, whether it's film, whether it's music, whether it's art. I think the issue as well is that we shouldn't be putting out work that is prioritizing the Western view. As Africans, we are always kind of considerate of what we should be doing or what we shouldn't be doing and how it's going to be perceived. And I think that's something that we need to kind of like unpick individually, whether it's within our communities, within our cultures, within our countries. It's like, why is it not okay to just do it the way we think is right and then present it? And so that Western view is an issue. Also, I think, you know, yeah, there's no need to edit ourselves. We can present ourselves the way that we are, you know, within our community, and there's no need to edit that. And also, I think the perspective of creative industries within Africa needs to change. You know, when I was a kid, I said, you know, I wanted to do art, and my parents were like, okay, do some biology first, and then after you do the biology, you can do the art on the side. And I went through all of my life doing the art on the side. And it's now taken me so much longer to get to where I need to be. And I'm not there yet because I've had to take all of the side roads with no support to get there. Yeah. You know, we need to support creatives within Africa and say, you know what, you can be a stylist, you can be a filmmaker, you can be a ceramicist, you don't have to be a doctor. We don't all have to be doctors. There's so many doctors in Sudan that we don't have anyone doing anything else. And the country is failing because there's so many doctors, and we export doctors to other countries.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is also an issue. We need to basically understand that the creative economy of what we do is so important. There's so much money to be made. We need to pick up on that.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to speak to what Maya touched on now in terms of picking up on the things that are working. So if you look at it, presently kids are so engaged with gaming, and the African market, in the games and esports industry in the African market is growing rapidly. And not until we start understanding that there is so much to gain, the economy has so much to gain in terms of investing in the games and esports industry right now, and having these kids who are still in primary or secondary school, putting the right infrastructure for them to you know, really tap into this industry. We might leave it too late in terms of getting into the thick of things, or when that's if we even get into it. But we should not get into that future where we start saying, like Maya said, we are exporting doctors. At that point, we might be exporting people within the games industry. I'll give an example. As a company, we have a game we are working on, which is tied around the Yoruba mythology, just trying to teach the Yoruba history through gaming. And we've been looking out for a video games developer for the last 2 years. We've not been able to get any in Nigeria. And this is not because we don't have people who should be able to do this, but because nobody has paid attention to it, that this is a market that is in need, and they need to put, you know, that level of investment into it. Yeah.
So now, it's very interesting what you just mentioned, because it goes back to also what Maya was saying earlier. The government, do you feel like there's not enough investment and enough assistance for creative endeavors at a grassroots level at all? Yeah, all of you the same. Oh, yeah. I think Catherine, you might be on mute. I think your sound.
Yeah. I think there isn't enough. You know, for instance, when I look at the industry in Nigeria, there is really not enough. Like Nollywood has made a lot of strides recently, but there still needs to be a lot done for the grassroots, you know, the creative industries at the grassroots. You know, we need to have grants put in place. The government needs to generally give those grants. And, the government has tried to make loans available. But, when you're looking at an emerging filmmaker with nothing, who is trying to tell stories, they really have nothing to secure a loan. So those opportunities that the government is putting there is then going back to the big filmmakers who really do not need it, and those who really need to have the help so that there can be a diversity in the voices that we have in the creative arts don't get that help. So that's where the grants will help. We need a government to come up with, how to help these small films be seen around the country. Like, it's impossible. Nigeria doesn't have that many cinemas, and Nigeria is one of the countries that has the most cinemas in Africa, but it's still not enough even for the population of Nigeria. So, and the cinemas, of course, are businesses, and they focus on what is going to make them money. So we don't get to see the stories of these small-time emerging filmmakers whose stories need to go out. So the government needs to have those cinemas that cater to independents. We have something similar like that here in Alberta, in Canada. Like, there's a Metro Cinema, which would take the films of independent filmmakers who are from Alberta and screen it. You have a deal with them. It's a 50-50 split, but they will screen it for you. So we need similar things. We need to get these voices out. We need to have this. For instance, at Benga, they are doing gaming. There's no support from the government. So everything, if they have to go international, they have to attend film festivals or to attend gaming festivals, they've got to raise the funds. Whereas other Western countries are giving grants to their individuals, independent artists, to go and attend this, where they don't have to pay back the grants, but you just go and show this is what my country is doing. Because when you give this kind of exposure, then it opens up opportunities for collaborations with Western companies, with other companies that want to come in and invest. And this is the way to draw the money back into the country. So I think the government needs to do a lot more. Right now, there's just no support. And I will leave it there so that others will have a chance to chip in here.
Thank you. Good answer. Just beyond especially for you, Catherine, as a filmmaker, just beyond the monetary aspect, there's also things like copyrights, property, intellectual rights. I imagine the enforcement is not as strong as you'd like it. So obviously that also comes into play for ways that the government can support us more.
Yeah, no, it's right. And it has improved in recent times, where there has been enforcement, where, copyrights have been infringed, and also there's been some improvement. But where we have not seen improvement at all is in the areas of piracy. And it is getting a lot more complex because of the, everything is going into the metaverse now, So everything is now in the, online, basically. So, and it's really hard to catch these people online. When these pirates are online, it's really hard because, for instance, 2 Weeks in Lagos was pirated before it was released, So I was sleeping one morning and somebody woke me up and said, your film is on YouTube. Yeah. We haven't even released, so it was. And we started searching. The distributors were trying to get a hold of these people. We were finding, companies registered in the US, registered somewhere in the Cayman Islands, and nothing. You can't trace them. Yeah. So, so this is what is the biggest problem, where the government has to come in. Because the question for us is, how did it get into the hands of these people? Because this was at a point where it hasn't even been released. So you can't blame this. You can't even say they saw it in the cinemas or they took it from, it hasn't been released. So how did it get into the hands of these people? So piracy, there has to be a lot more that needs to be done, you know, in terms with piracy, in terms of clamping down on, you know, studios, you know, and, you know, distribution companies, exhibitors, all those places. The law has to, it just has to go beyond copyright infringement and clamp down on those other ones to help filmmakers, you know, so that you don't lose your livelihood. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your insight.
Yeah.
So Maya, Benga, how about you? Do you also feel like beyond the monetary aspect, the lack of infrastructure for protection of the government is impacting the work that you do?
Yeah, it's definitely is. So, like I mentioned, Africa is mobile first. If we are looking at trying to get the gadgets, say the PCs or the consoles, that's extremely expensive for the African market. So mobile first, but we still struggle with things around data. That's internet data for you to stream. For 1 2 hours, you need about 18 gig of data, and that is really expensive. The government needs to do things around, you know, subsidizing the cost of data. That would really help in the work that we do. If the government would do a little bit more, Catherine spoke about the Nollywood and the music industry in Nigeria, for example. These industries, we hear about them now, not because the government infused money into them, but these individuals actually took their destinies in their own hand and drove these industries to where they are at the moment. And it is now you are beginning to see the government trying to say, oh, what can we do? Even though they are still not doing anything, but they are asking questions. At least now they are asking questions. And if you observe Nigeria and the African continent as a whole, we have a lot of content curators. And just a little push from the government we would experience a significant growth in this industry, in the creative economy as a whole. Because presently the creative economy is a whole lot. It is a massive industry that cannot be ignored. If it was ignored in time past, presently we cannot ignore it anymore. It's a place where we need to have a lot of infrastructural input from the government to help it grow, and we would see tremendous growth in our economy in general.
Oh, for sure. So, thank you for your answer. And, how about you, Maya? Would you say the same thing as Catherine and Benga?
Oh, well, no, not really. I work between Sudan and the UK. So my experience within the UK is very different. I work I'm a creative director of a brand that is established and, stocks in stores in the UK. So it's a very different experience from the project that I'm part of in Sudan. So Wajo is not expecting any support from the government. I don't know how much you know about the political situation in Sudan currently. We've just been through a revolution. We've just been through 2 coups. There is no government to speak of as such. So it's a very difficult environment to work in. And we're nowhere near, countries like Nigeria or Kenya or South Africa in terms of infrastructure. There is no infrastructure. People are struggling with the everyday basics, hence this project to try and teach crafts and create, an environment for women to learn a skill to create products to generate income for their families. We're talking on a very basic grassroots level. In terms of Sudan specifically, I think I'd like to see a little bit more from the private sector. Their corporate responsibilities need to be something that they really need to take seriously. There's companies like Coke, there's companies like there's some big companies in Sudan that individuals who are making a lot of money, and I think as a start they should take their corporate responsibility a little bit more seriously and try to kind of make some impact, because we're not going to see anything from the government anytime soon.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for your answer, and all of you for your great insights really for the discussion. Now we just have about 7 minutes left, I believe. If anybody in the audience has questions, they can go ahead and ask them. Just unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hello, my question is for Mbeka. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. It's about gaming. You talked about how you are developing gaming, and I would like to know how gaming can be applied in education in reaching out underprivileged communities in Africa.
All right, thank you very much, Karine. I hope I got that right.
Karine. Yes.
All right, thank you very much. So in terms of how gaming can reach the underprivileged economy or communities in Africa in so many ways. So for example, I'll speak to some of the things we do. We run the Playful Computing curriculum where we teach children computational thinking. So I'll give an example, and this was the high for me for 2021. We were at an all-girls school where we taught, I spoke about Just Dance with the algorithm, using dance to teach computing. And when we finished, the girls, they met with their principal, the principal of the school, and the principal was trying to get feedback from them. And what they said was, everything we learned today, we had learned it in class. But when we learned it in class, we had zero understanding from what we were taught. But today, with what we've done, though we played from the start of the session to the end of the session, I can do everything that we were taught in class perfectly. So those kind of sessions, those workshops are workshops that, because they are in two ways. Yes, I know when we talk about computing or computational thinking, the first thing that comes to our mind is we need to have a computer. But what we've been able to do, the sessions are run in two directions. One is the plugged part and the other is the unplugged part. Because we have more classrooms that are not connected to a computer or to the internet, we should be able to teach in an unplugged way. So we've been able to teach these sessions or these workshops using the unplugged version, where we don't need computers, where we don't need any form of internet connectivity. That's one. The second end is the place of teaching kids about the video games industry, about esports, because there are multiple career pathways in esports that children can be involved in. So presently, we are trying to work on a proposal where we can teach these career pathways in the vocational schools here in Nigeria. And the idea of doing this is more to drive employment or employability skills. And the video games industry provides that in a very large scale. Where students or children can come to become esports coach or esports analyst or event organizers or community managers. So these are different career pathways they can take up, and these we can take into the underserved communities and teach them without them needing to have the resources which would drive these things. Then lastly, I will speak to the fact that because Africa is mobile first, again, mobile phone, the poorest of home, you would always see a mobile phone that can play one game or the other. So what we try to do as a business is look for these casual games that we can play on any kind of device, where kids who are not from the privileged homes can have access to these games and they can compete in any of our tournaments. So in these different ways, we are trying to drive learning in these communities, but again, the gatekeepers need to be educated again about these opportunities and these career pathways for their children. Yeah, I hope that answers your question, Karine.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Benga. There's a question from Aisha in the chat that says, will the panelists be willing to share what they've enjoyed the most out of their journeys so far? So who wants to start? Maya, if you want to, you can start.
I think it's always going to be, you know, the people that you meet on the journey and the things that you learn. I think, you know, a lot of the time you think that you're going to go into an experience and you're going to teach something to someone, but in fact, you learn a lot more from them and you learn a lot more from the experience. And yeah, I think for me, it's always, you know, what drives me to collaborate with people and do projects with different people is always that, you know, it's a great way to work. You can always become very insular in your ideas, in your perspective as a creative. So working with other people is always very enriching.
Yeah. Thank you.
For me, again, like Catherine, Maya mentioned, it's the people you meet. So one thing I enjoyed that I enjoy and still enjoy is whenever I get to speak with these kids in school, or these children in school, or the teens, whichever age group I am speaking to. But it's always a learning curve for me in the sense that, so the very first time I was called to speak to a group of students, when I finished, in my head, I felt like, Benga, you didn't pass the message across. The message didn't go through because you spoke like you were speaking to an adult community. So from that day, I had to go back to rework my presentations to fit the set of people I am speaking to, which is the student community or the primary and secondary school student community. So it's the learning and the set of people you meet along the way, and the ability to even teach or to pass across knowledge, to share a new body of knowledge, to be the gatekeepers or be the students, but being able to pass that knowledge across at every point in time. That's, for me, is the major high, that I can pass knowledge at every point in time. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, and I think for me, what I have enjoyed most, I agree with everybody, say the people you meet along the way. That has been really, really great. All the different people I've had to work with, but mostly I would say what has given me the most satisfaction, has been seeing audience reactions to my films, like, being in the US, in Canada, in Cannes, and having diverse audiences watch it and see, an Africa that is different from what they have always thought in their mind. And then having them, talk about that experience and how it impacted them to see Africa and Africans depicted the way that I have depicted them in my films. That has been the most, I would say that has been the most, the thing that has touched me the most in my journey so far. Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much for that answer. And I think we'll end there with your great message about narrative, which I think was really the theme of the discussion today. Now, thank you guys all so much for participating. Very enjoyable discussion, very informative also. And thanks also to all the attendees. So now I'll pass it to Joy.
Thank you, Sheikh, and thank you to all our fantastic panelists. It has really been an engaging discussion, and I learned so much about what goes into the different industries that you're all a part of. And I'm very happy to see that the themes that we talked about from the first panel to the third panel have been consistent about taking back the African narrative and by what African art looks like, and how it's our responsibility to unite as Africans and to share our messages, whether it be through gaming or film or other art and other forms of media. So we will now be moving on to the discussion and networking portion. This will take place through breakout rooms that you'll be able to join, and then after that, we'll have the keynote speech. So please give me a moment as I set up the breakout rooms.
I'm really sorry, but I'm gonna have to bow out. But I just wanted to take this opportunity to say I'm, really grateful for meeting everyone and being a part of this discussion. I'm really sorry I'm on a different time schedule, so I apologize in advance to everyone for not being able to make the rest of the session. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you for being here with us. Okay, so the breakout rooms have been opened, and I did not assign the participants, but I assigned the speakers, so you can join any of the breakout rooms that with somebody that you'd like to speak to.